Welcome to Suits and Sneakers, a series featuring sage advice and candid conversations with seasoned leaders from diverse backgrounds and styles. I'm your host, Carrie Tuttle. With my guests, we deep dive into areas of team engagement, motivation, and effective performance management. Get ready to be inspired and transform your approach to leadership. Please like, subscribe, or follow to be notified when future episodes are released. Let's get started. All right. Today I have with me Masako Long. She is VP of Sales at Janusea in Seattle. And I know that she's been serving the financial institution space by partnering with fintechs, banks, and credit unions to overcome integration challenges. Although she stumbled on sales many years ago, right? So you shared that with me. She chose to stay in the profession because of her natural curiosity and her ability to identify gaps, problem solve, and constantly learn. She enjoys helping others curate their love for sales, as well as enabling leadership in all forms. So I'm really excited about our conversation today. Masako, welcome to Suits and Sneakers.
Thank you so much, Carrie. I'm excited to be here. When I heard about the title of your podcast, I was super excited because actually I end up going to conferences in like a blazer like this and like a pair of dunks or something. And usually I'm like doing it with company colors. So suits and sneakers is totally my jam when I'm at conferences.
Oh, that's so great. Yeah. And I love that look, right? Like just
Yeah.
it's sort of the contrast of, yes, I'm a professional, but I also like to just be myself. So
Yep, exactly.
that's really important to have your personality shine through. So
Yeah.
So I know we've talked before, but maybe you can share with the audience a little bit of your background and what you do with Janusea now.
Sure. Currently, as Carrie mentioned, I do run sales at Janusea, but we're a 2-year-old company. Being in this role means doing a lot of things, right? Like helping grow the sales team and put together a process, put together pricing, work with not only our ecosystem partners, but then start to like help be a channel, right, for them to sell, and then doing kind of the marketing and partnership things as well. So it's kind of exciting where you get to have your hands in a lot of things. Obviously, my focus is bringing business and having sales, but I work in the community financial institution space and helping fintechs and financial institutions really connect through an integration. This has been a challenge for many years because there's a lot of old technology in banking and, it works, rightfully so. But, as financial institutions, especially community financial institutions, want to compete with the larger institutions as well as kind of the new cool applications, they need to be able to stay with the times. And in order to do that, there needs to be some sort of bridge connecting old technology and new technology. And that's why Janusea exists.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I know, in some of the financial sectors, that's certainly been a challenge. I know there's tons about like privacy of information and protecting, with data security measures, et cetera. And I think that exists in most industries these days.
Sure.
We're all using computers now. We're not using pen and paper. So we all need to get used to and get comfortable with technology. So that's great that you're leading the charge there. Tell me a little bit I know you stepped into a leadership role fairly young. Tell me about that transition from being an individual contributor to stepping into a leadership role.
Yeah. My foray into sales was interesting first. Like I, didn't expect that to go that way. And then I really loved sales and I was in part of an inside sales group. And that was kind of doing smaller sales, helping the outside sales team, that sort of thing. And then from there, I kind of had transitioned into more of a product sales because we were really focusing on like specific technologies that we wanted to grow the business. So I'd taken a role there, but there was some kind of a little bit of turmoil and turnover inside the inside sales department. So I was asked if I would consider, leading that group. And I was a little nervous, right? It was kind of going back to the colleagues that I had worked with and having to manage them as well as start to hire people. So I was a little bit nervous about that, but I had a good colleague that I had already worked for a number of years, like remind me that, I did really well in inside sales and I had a lot to bring to the game. And I was able to really dig into that for about 4 years. At the time, we were kind of low margin, process wasn't very organized. Collaboration with the outside sales team wasn't great. And after I was done with that, I transitioned to an outside sales role again, but a sales role. But during that time, I was really proud that we were able to really come together and be cohesive with the process, focusing kind of on the people side of the equation in terms of understanding where people's strengths are, because we had some people that were really good cold callers and, could really show the team. I mean, actually, in my career, one of the people that I worked with at that time is the best cold caller I've ever met in my life. And she was so amazing. So she could teach people, right? And then we had other people that were really good at like creating bill of materials and quotes and really didn't need a lot of engineering help. So it was, working as a team and being really successful and knowing who had strengths in what areas really made us flourish. And we were able to grow margin and grow sales and really be more compatible with the outside sales team as well.
Amazing. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's kind of splitting those, one human might do a lot of things in a day, but splitting out those functions and saying, okay, what do we need and who's good at what and how
Yeah.
can we support each other? Love
And
that.
knowing who to go to, right? I think like if we think about leadership, obviously I was the leader of this inside sales team, but I think like everyone has a part to play as a leader, right? Because I was never very strong on cold calling. I did what I had to do in my role, but I think like being able to see someone with high confidence and doing that all the time, that makes everyone else kind of step up, even though they know they might not be her, but they could get better at their abilities as well. So yeah.
That's great. When you think about when you first took on that role, was there any hesitancy? How did you feel about stepping into this new position?
Yeah. There was hesitancy. I think, I mean, the great thing, I was allowed kind of a safe space to grow there. And I was confident in my previous skills being in inside sales. So I think that helped. But, I think it was challenging. And when I think back to that, I'm like, it's unfortunate that, a lot of people get stuck feeling like an imposter in a role that they are clearly made for. Right. But yeah, I think I was lucky to be at the same company and making that transition and not have to like immediately prove myself going into a new organization, that sort of thing.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah, because you knew the processes, you knew all the
Yeah.
people, et cetera.
Yeah.
Absolutely. What advice would you give? Because I think I hear this a lot, right? Being a leadership coach, I hear a lot of people maybe thinking they don't deserve a role, or even if they believe, yes, I got it for a reason, intellectually, in their
Hmm.
heart, they have this self-doubt or something like that. What would you tell people about how to progress and how
Right.
to fill that role?
I think a lot of my leadership philosophy is built on kind of curiosity and listening. So I think it's like not going in there with a set agenda, right? Like feel confident in yourself, first of all, but don't go in there with a set agenda. Think about like if you're coming into a team that's already existing, like ask questions, kind of do an interview, like learn about their strengths and their concerns and that sort of thing, and kind of compile it and bring back information that shows them you were listening, right? And then I think from there, that kind of sets a good foundation for you to be able to grow and kind of not only be vulnerable, like they're not then immediately looking at you to make a mistake, right? Or or
Right.
fail in a situation. Like they may work with you to like kind of bolster you up because you showed them mutual respect in that role. So but I think also like because me being a woman in sales and a woman in leadership, and at the time, there wasn't very many. I think it's starting to change, but it's still the case. Like in tech sales, you don't see as many women as you'd hope, right? And I think
Yeah.
sometimes women feel like they have to check all the boxes, and and men are like, hey, I can two or three of those, I'm fine. I can deal with it. And I want us to bring a little bit more of that attitude, right? Because I think we can learn and get to some places, but we just have to have a little more grace with ourselves when we're entering those
Mhm.
kind of roles.
Yeah, and trusting
Yeah,
ourselves to know we're going to figure it out.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Like we know
I
most
mean,
of
we
it.
will, right? We have to.
Love it. So I know one of your philosophies you've shared with me is about creating a safe space for your team. So
Yeah.
tell me more about that.
Yeah, when I think about before I came in to do a role like this, I had been doing um, like field sales account executive for a long
Mhm.
time, and I think about a lot of the some good managers, some not great managers, and you learn from all of them, right? Like even if you don't have someone that you can really look to as an example, you want to take things that you see good in them and think about how you could do better or improve upon the process. And also thinking that a manager doesn't have to have all the answers, right? Someone in a
Right.
leadership role doesn't have to have all the answers. And so when I think about like what I mentioned with my inside sales team, when you're part of a team, even if it's a sales team and you maybe are somewhat competitive with your team, they're still your team members, right? How can you grow together? And there's ways to do that, right? You can lead by example. You can show them this is this is how I'm hitting my quota. This is how I'm making my calls. This is how I close deals, that sort of thing. Or take initiatives in certain projects, right? There may be like a sales process that needs to be improved. There may be like communication between a sales team and an engineering team, like or to the onboarding team or something like that, right? Like how can you improve upon them rather than just like complain and say that things aren't happening? How can you take ownership of that? And I think that even if you're not a leader by title, you can be a leader in your in your group or whatever. So but I take that also mentality with me as being now VP of sales. Like what does that mean? Like as I
Mhm.
hire people or as they have some initiative they want to bring up or spearhead or something like that, they can do that. I don't need to be the one like you know getting all the accolades for making something happen. Like they can do what they do well and share what they do well.
Yeah, it's fun to see your team members taking charge
Yeah.
and running with an idea because that's the biggest compliment to you as
Hmm.
a leader.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so kudos to you. That's awesome.
I mean, and one of the things I wanted to mention about my like that inside sales team that I ran so many years ago, like I still see what they're up to on LinkedIn. And I keep in touch with a lot of them, and I think it's really cool to see like how far they've come. Like I have one of them is a CEO of a company right now, like and and others are just like really flourishing. So it's you know I only had a small part in that, but it feels it's amazing to see that like the trajectory of where they've gone, and that makes me feel good
Mhm.
about like you know my part in that whole process.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
and it's hugely motivational, right? You're laying the path for somebody to excel in their current role, which gives them confidence and that leads to their next role
Yeah.
and so on and so on. I love that. So you've talked a little bit about communication. What do new leaders need to consider as it relates to like gaining team support for an idea or yeah, just owning a project? You've talked about ownership a little bit.
I think when we're in this career field, I mean, we're adults, right? Like, I mean, obviously, sometimes some of us are bringing on very new to the career world, but I think that part of it is as a leader setting an example. Like, no job should be too small. Like, obviously, you need to delegate and show. You as a leader, you need to think about spend time doing strategic things too. But I think like if I do what I say I'm going to do, I need you to trust that. And also if you do say the same to me, I want to have some mutual respect about that. So being able to show mutual respect to each other and demonstrate that as a leader, I think that's the way to demonstrate that. Now I have a teenage daughter, and that doesn't always work, right? Like sometimes you're trying to show all the good behaviors, and you know people will do what they do. But I think by continuing exhibiting that and trying to demonstrate what's right, um, do what I tell you versus showing an example. I think that's
Mhm.
the path I try to take. I don't shy away from hard conversations. You need to still have those conversations if your words aren't coming across. But I think, especially in sales, like there's ways for people to be motivated, right? They should be
Mhm.
motivated by their paycheck or maybe getting commissions or something like that. Like I don't feel like I'm the rah-rah motivator. I will help clear barriers and help people move forward and do their job. Or I'm even with my team right now, it's more operational, but it's like I'll clear the path and help you think about ways you can be efficient. But I'm not here to always like be your motivator, because you need to find some of that internally as well.
Yeah.
In your job. So
Well, and a lot of
yeah.
people say that when they're able to define how they get a task
Hmm.
done, when they know what the end result is,
Yeah.
that's very motivating too. Just kind of
Yeah.
deciding the how and being the artist
Yeah.
in execution.
Yeah. I agree. I think the helping them know the how and like what to do helps them with their own why, right? Like how they kind of present themselves and how they want to participate. So I try
Mm-hmm.
to focus on kind of making sure processes are as clear as possible and what the outcomes should be. And then I think the other stuff starts to flow more easily. Because when you're confused about what you do, and then you don't have confidence, that's where you feel really unsuccessful as a salesperson or as a leader, any role really. I think so. I think
Mm-hmm.
building confidence and having kind of those parameters to operate. I mean, obviously you can think outside the box and stuff, but like general parameters, it helps.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
How do you help your team members prioritize what they're trying to do when they're faced with a lot of competing
Mhm.
priorities?
Yeah. I had a conversation like that last week with my sales and marketing coordinator because we just had a lot of going on, and it's a small company, so it's like, okay, here's a bunch of quotes that need to be done, here's a bunch of sales orders, here's like updating pipeline, like can we. And so I think typically we have a hierarchy of what comes first, right? Like obviously we need to get sales orders out so because clients can see them and do
Mm-hmm.
that. But I think when you're thrown a lot, it's just a matter of taking the time in the day and saying, "Hey, I know I threw a lot at you. Do you want to sit down and help, walk through it so we can kind of put timelines around some of the stuff?" Because I know sometimes when I send things, I don't necessarily say when they need to get done. I'm just like, but uh, happy to help you bucket them into like if it's a longer term project or if I can wait till next week kind of thing. So
Mm-hmm.
I try to allow the opening to talk about it if it requires it, right? If they're feeling overwhelmed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So, switching gears a little bit, when we talk about leading a team, and you kind of alluded to this a little bit when you said that we don't have to have all the answers, but there's a lot of talk out in the press about vulnerability as leaders.
Mhm.
What does that mean to you?
It's hard. I think that for me, I'm the eldest daughter. I'm a little bit of a recovering perfectionist. I think like I used to, always want to do the right thing, right? So, I think the way I showed up in the world was like, okay, I need to make sure I'm always on point. I have the right answers. I'm dressed right, that sort of thing. And I think now it's about like, who am I really authentically? Like, what can I do to help? And I
Mhm.
think like in the past for me, it was more about, um, I was okay being a leader internally. Like I knew I felt good because my team, even colleagues would come to me for advice or people would ask me to help out in projects because they appreciated my opinions and advice and that sort of thing. But I I think even if it's uncomfortable for me right now, sometimes I do work on putting myself out there more, right? Because I think there needs to be an opportunity for people to see other people like me, names that you can't pronounce, maybe, like, I don't know, like a woman in tech sales, different diverse background. I think it's important to kind of have the opportunity to put myself out there, even if I'm uncomfortable. Vulnerability to me means like sometimes you got to put yourself out there. You got to be okay with making making mistakes. You got to be okay like also sharing with your, close team that you don't always have the answers and but you're willing
Mhm.
to work with them to figure out like, let's work together to figure it out, right?
Mhm.
I think that's kind of where I try to practice it on a daily basis.
Mhm. Well, and it makes them feel good
Yeah.
because knowing that you don't have all the answers, you're essentially asking, or maybe you overtly ask
Yeah.
them for what they think the answer maybe is.
Right.
And yeah, like you said, you figure
Yeah.
it out together. That's
And
amazing.
I think like even when you don't have all the answers, I think the important thing is that you do your best to have the answers, right? Like you want to be a manager or leader that is also educated, right? Like I want to educate myself as much as possible in my industry, and I want people to when Masako says something, she knows what she's talking about because she's studied, not only studied.
Mhm.
I mean, she's been in the industry a while, but she's also studied and learned and kind of made adjustments to her opinions about certain things in the this space. And being able to see like gaps or know kind of um, be able to understand where people are at and where their gaps are in comparison to maybe some of their peers, right? Like when we work with other financial institutions or even fintechs, like on a certain journey. So I think it's important to also demonstrate that you do your best to know your industry and know, kind of the field you're in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Um, what is something that either like a mistake that you've seen or a mistake you've made yourself that you think is helpful for leaders to be aware? Like we all stumble.
Yeah.
So what's something to be aware of?
I think it is like acting like, especially if you're changing jobs into a new company, for example, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
you're coming in, you're coming in like nobody knows you. Yes, there's some areas where you need to prove yourself, but I think don't do that in lieu of like also kind of really getting to know your team and getting to know the company. I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to just be your immediate team, but cross training yourself to know like the other groups in your company, right? Like don't come in here as like the person that knows it all and will get everything done and will change the world, right? Because in fact, especially in the sales world, right? Like sales leaders have pretty high turnover, and so if you come in with that attitude and don't have mutual respect for your teammates, then it can be it's not a great position for you to be in, right? Like
No.
as a leader. So
Yeah, there can be a lot of
yeah.
backlash. Definitely. So you talked a little bit about doing your homework and doing your research. How do you get up to speed and stay up to speed, even in your current role? Like, what
Mhm.
sources do you use, and how do you do that research?
I mean, sometimes I feel like I'm really behind these days, but I think especially as I call on a lot of fintechs. Fintechs are where we spend a lot of our time. So, kind of looking at the trends out there. And even as fintechs are coming on, I like to research their company, kind of what their use case is. Like, is it under certain umbrellas, right? Is it under lending, or is it under kind of account management, or is it under kind of like an ERP kind of data analytics solution? And then kind of dive into the industry in general. I mean, finance industry aside, but like maybe data analytics in general and as it relates to the finance industry. So kind of diving into that really helps. And I think I also try to keep like a matrix of general trends in the industry so I can kind of keep up to date. Because we're also working very heavily specifically with banks and credit unions. I like to kind of stay up with um, trade articles and trade communications in those fields, right? So
Hmm.
you got to sign up for them, make sure they're going in your inbox, and try to at least sort through them and not just junk them all the time, right? Like you have
Yeah.
to actually review them and that sort of thing. But I also attend a lot of conferences, and what I like to do when I attend conferences is, even though I'm in booth duty, I do actually go to all of the different booths and learn about them and learn about their pitch and what they're doing for the industry, because there's so many cool things coming out there, and sometimes it is overwhelming. I mean, especially as a salesperson, I like learning from other salespeople too. So I like to see how they're doing
Hmm.
their pitch, how they're kind of positioning themselves in the market. So getting out there, there's so many people that sit in a booth and go, "Woe is me, nobody's coming to my booth." You got to get out there and talk to other
Oh, yeah.
people, and even if it's talking to your peers, if no actual customers are coming by to talk to you, like you got to take ownership of your own destiny,
Hmm.
kind of thing. So I think
Yeah.
being able to do that is fun.
Yeah. Have you ever heard somebody's pitch and thought, man, I want to hire you?
Yes, I mean, I've definitely come across salespeople, and even like an old CEO of ours used to talk about someone with the twinkle in their eye, right? Like sometimes you go to
Mm.
places where like maybe they're just working a coffee shop, or like I don't want to say just like
Yeah.
but like you think of someone doing a part-time job somewhere like while they're going to school, and I'm like, have you ever thought about actually doing sales? And I've met a lot of people that are like, I've never thought about sales, right? And so I think you mentioned at the beginning about me being having passion about sales, but I think there's a lot of ways to enter the sales realm that doesn't mean you're the center of attention and being like a
Hmm.
charismatic, person up on stage. I think there's many opportunities where you can utilize skills for helping people or wanting to know more about them to be able to bridge a gap, or even selling something that you're really passionate about, right?
Hmm.
Because actually some founders that aren't from a sales background is that now they have to figure out how to communicate what they're really passionate about, and they don't always know how to do that. So being able to kind of see people out in the wild that could be really great salespeople is really fun for me to see. So
Yeah.
yeah.
That happened. I had that experience. A server at a restaurant
Mm,
was serving me, and I got the sense that she really cares about people.
yeah.
And it drew me in. And I was like, girl, I want to
Yeah.
hire you.
Yeah.
You are amazing.
Exactly.
Yeah. But yet I didn't want her to leave the restaurant because I go there quite often.
Right.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. You're like, I need you around because
yeah.
you're amazing. But
Yeah.
it's so cool to see when, I mean, that gives me like, I just want to be like, oh, I love you, because I really appreciate when people are good at that, right? Like good at kind of that customer service sales without necessarily meaning to, but having curiosity, asking questions, asking second level questions, right? Not just doing the
Mhm.
one like, how's your day, but like going beyond that. So I think that's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and as a leader, like just always looking for talent
Hmm.
is, I think, part of the recipe for success as well,
True.
right? We always
Yeah,
need to be looking. Yeah,
very
definitely.
true.
Um, so when you think about where you're at in life, you've had several different experiences. How do you define success?
Yeah, I think for me, it's very different going into more of like a manager leadership kind of role versus obviously when you're doing sales, you define success by your how you hit quota, that sort of thing, or go beyond that. But I think it is for me in kind of the leadership realm. It's about, do people feel comfortable talking to me about things, whether they're working directly for me or at a company, not just complaining about things, but talking through like maybe vulnerable moments, right? Talking through like where they feel like they're not succeeding in kind of what they're working on, how we can work on it together.
Mhm.
That really brings me a lot of joy and makes me feel successful. And frankly, a reason why I sought out management roles, because um, for a long time, I wasn't given the opportunity, and I think that I had a lot of value to bring. So, as a high performing sales individual, right? Like if you're always hitting quota and you're always top one or two in your company, and you talk about, okay, I do want my career path to go maybe into management. And I think sometimes people have this like thought about how high performers don't always make good management. And, I can
Mhm.
see some of the reasoning why, but I think that's one of the things that held me back from going back into management for a while. And I've had, a couple of leaders tell me that I need you in this role. And I'm like, that's fine. But you also have me doing a bunch of other things, right? Like I'm
Mhm.
always the person you call on if you need to update your sales process or update the sales deck or onboard a new person. And so I think like I felt like I had more to give. And so I wanted to, help other people realize like, um, their love for sales or love for doing things, and I want to help people understand their strengths and build
Mhm.
them up as well, right? I mean, obviously you can do that without having the title, but I
Mhm.
think it's a fun opportunity for me to kind of be back in a role like this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I think it's a trap that a lot of companies fall into. They'll take their top performers, give them sort of like special projects,
Hmm.
and they're not parts of the job that they're actually incented on or
Hmm.
measured on. And so, therefore, it pulls them away from their primary
Yeah.
responsibility. And then they start saying no,
Right.
right? Because they're
Yep.
not going to get paid on that. And then so
Hmm.
you're missing out on maybe some, like mind share or leadership. And so just formalize it. Give them
Yeah.
the role that will put them in a position that they can actually do that.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, one thought I had was when I was kind of in one of those roles and was really wanting to go down the management path, and I was kind of told this, is that, there's two sides of it. One is you could help me be a leader and really kind of tie this like loyalty to the company and work through it. And I could develop 3, 5, 10 more people just like me, right?
Hmm.
High performing sales, always hitting quota, that sort of thing. And all also willing to help their peers.
Hmm.
Or I could leave. And what do then you have neither option. And I
Yeah.
think, it's important for people that get put in that position to realize there's a lot of other opportunities, right? Like if it's not always within your company, there will be other opportunities out there for you to take advantage of. But
Yeah. Yeah. And I think a lot of people are motivated by growth and stretching themselves. And like you said, putting yourself out there or out of your comfort zone.
Mhm.
And therefore, as leaders, we need to give people the opportunity to do that. Yeah. How do you stretch your people and give them opportunities to try on new skills?
Yeah, I do, especially here at Janusea right now, we have a lot of projects in terms of like even basic things we need to do, like, update our phone tree, right? Like the sales needs to be highly involved in that. And so I provide my team the opportunity to say, is this something that you want to try out and figure out?
Mhm.
I mean, obviously we can bring in other resources, but so that's kind of what I like to start with, right? Of course, people will get projects that they don't want to do sometimes too, but I think like
Right.
being able to give the opportunity to say, is this something that you want to try out and learn more about? Because I know there's a lot of people that like, their own process every time and it can't be flexible. But I think for the most part, for me, I try to hire people that have flexibility and want to learn and grow and try other
Mm.
things outside of their own swim lane. So I
Yeah.
think being able to provide those opportunities is key.
Yeah. Yeah. Excellent. What are you working on these days that, like, as a company, that you think is an interesting story for people to hear about leading through?
Yeah. Well, I
Okay.
think like just as a start, as a 2-year-old company, there's still a lot, right? The great thing is just, at the beginning, it was really about creating a immediate sales process. Like, how do we work? We had to make a few pivots. Like we were first focused really highly on fintech, and then we expanded that because we knew that there was a place for us directly with financial institutions. So now it's a lot more about how do we drive efficiency between sales and like onboarding and kind of the engineering development side of the house, like
Mm.
because now we're getting to a point we are growing pretty fast and it's exciting. And I think it's being able to find a nice path that has really good communication in between those stages to have them very prepared. So one, they understand kind of the pipeline of stuff coming in, right? So I need to be better about really knowing my pipeline and the potential deals that may come in, but also kind of um, ha- even though I'm pushing them, also having an understanding of where they are with like delivery and how soon they can start projects and that sort of stuff is, I think, very helpful in the context of not only communicating to clients up front where we're at, but then also kind of in the long run in terms of client happiness and success, right? So
Mhm.
that's the part that's exciting for me right now is being able to collaborate with my peers in different groups to achieve that.
Very cool. Wow. Well, and congratulations on your fast growth. That's
Thank you.
exciting.
It's exciting.
Yeah. Um, so thinking back to young Masako taking on your first leadership role, what advice would you give to your former self, knowing what you know today?
Yeah. um, well, I mentioned I was a recovering perfectionist, so it sounds a little bit cliche, but I would probably lead with don't be afraid to fail. Um,
Mm.
hey, Moscow, you're stepping into this new leadership role. You'll feel like you need to prove yourself. Perfection's not the answer here. Every mistake is an opportunity to learn and grow. Have confidence in your skills and trust your ability to learn along the way. Leverage your embrace your curiosity and aptitude to learn. Continue to ask questions and seek new perspectives. Um, I think I'd also tell myself, and we talked about this too, but show up authentically and lead with your unique strengths, right? Like just
Yeah.
because you don't have the right mentor yet and you don't have people in your immediate circle that you can look up to, it doesn't mean that you can't be an excellent mentor to those you're meant to lead, right? Like you can
Mhm.
break the pattern. You don't always have to do the same thing that the people before you have done, right? Like, so I think reminding my young self that your journey and experience are valuable and you have the foundational skills to be successful. So go out
Mm.
and embrace the challenge and believe in yourself and let's go.
Well said.
Yeah.
I love it. Let's go.
Thanks. Let's go. As the
That's,
young kids would say, right?
yeah, exactly. That's what they're all saying these days.
Yeah.
So what else would you like to share that we haven't covered?
Um, I enjoy collaborating and connecting up with people on LinkedIn that are in sales or technology or even in my
Mm.
industry. So please reach out. I really do learn from a lot of people on LinkedIn. I think I found a
Mhm.
lot of great kind of mentors in sales and also in the finance industry that have, some I've met, some I haven't met yet, but it's been fun to kind of do that. And again, don't be afraid. If you want to be in a leadership role, do it. Just go do
I love it. Excellent. Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Masako. I appreciate you joining and everything that you shared. It was really helpful. So thanks again.
Appreciate you taking the time.
Okay. We're happy you joined us for Suits and Sneakers. If you want to be an expert guest, look for the link in the show notes. Don't forget to follow us on Spotify or YouTube.